Fritz Jacob Haber, December 9th, 1868 to January 29th, 1934, was a Jewish German chemist who has been called one of the most important scientists and industrial chemists in human history. Haber, a known German nationalist, is also considered the father of chemical warfare for his years of pioneering work developing and weaponizing chlorine and other poisonous gases during World War I. He first proposed the use of the heavier-than-air chlorine gas as a weapon to break the trench deadlock during the Second Battle of Ypres. His work was later used, without his direct involvement, to develop the Zyklon B pesticide used for the killing of more than 1 million Jews in gas chambers in the greater context of the Holocaust. After the Nazis' rise to power in 1933, Haber resigned from his position. Already in poor health, he spent time in various countries before Chaim Weizmann invited him to become the director of the Seif Research Institute, now the Weizmann Institute, in Rehovot, Mandatory Palestine. He accepted the offer, but died of heart failure mid-journey in a Basel, Switzerland hotel on January 29, 1934, at the age of 65. Haber was the son of Siegfried and Paula Haber, who were first cousins who married in spite of considerable opposition from their families. Haber's father Siegfried was a well-known merchant in the town, who had founded his own business in dye pigments, paints, and pharmaceuticals. Paula experienced a difficult pregnancy and died 3 weeks after Fritz's birth, leaving Siegfried devastated and Fritz in the care of various aunts. His father never forgave him for the death of his mother. After his first university education, he attempted to work with his father, but his father insisted he belongs in academia, and the business world was not for him. During his time at University of Karlsruhe from 1894 to 1911, Haber and his assistant Robert Lou Rossignol invented the Haber-Bosch process, which is the catalytic formation of ammonia from hydrogen and atmospheric nitrogen under conditions of high temperature and pressure. This discovery was a direct consequence of Le Chatelier's principle, announced in 1884, which states that when a system is in equilibrium and one of the factors affecting it is changed, the system will respond by minimizing the effect of the change. Since it was known how to decompose ammonia in the presence of a nickel-based catalyst, one could derive from Le Chatelier's principle that the reaction could be reversed to produce ammonia at high temperature and pressure. To further develop the process for large-scale ammonia production, Haber turned to industry. Partnering with Karl Bosch at BASF, the process was successfully scaled up to produce commercial quantities of ammonia. The Haber-Bosch process was a milestone in industrial chemistry. The production of nitrogen-based products such as fertilizer and chemical feedstocks, which was previously dependent on acquisition of ammonia from limited natural deposits, now became possible using an easily available and abundant base, atmospheric nitrogen. The ability to produce much larger quantities of nitrogen-based fertilizers in turn supported much greater agricultural yields, supporting half the world's population. The discovery of a new way of producing ammonia had other significant economic impacts as well. Chile had been a major and almost unique exporter of natural deposits, such as sodium nitrate, caliche. After the introduction of the Haber process, naturally extracted nitrate production in Chile fell from 2.5 million tons, employing 60,000 workers and selling at $45 per ton, in 1925 to just 800,000 tons, produced by 14,133 workers and selling at $19 per ton in 1934. The annual world production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer is currently more than 100 million tons. The food base of half the current world population is based on the Haber-Bosch process. Haber was awarded the 1918 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for this work. He married Clara Immerwahr in 1903. Part 2. Now we examine the life of Clara Immerwahr, 1870 to 1915, including her tragic suicide and its relation to the involvement of her husband, Fritz Haber, in chemical warfare. Clara earned a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Breslau in 1900 as the first woman ever, and married Fritz within a year of her graduation. With no employment available for female scientists, Clara freelanced as an instructor in the continued education of women, mainly housewives, while struggling not to become a housewife herself. Her duties as the designated head of a posh household hardly brought fulfillment to her life. The outbreak of World War I further exacerbated the situation, as Fritz Haber applied himself in extraordinary ways to aid the German war effort, which included his initiative to develop chemical weapons. The night that he celebrated the success of the first chlorine cloud attack and his promotion to the rank of captain, Clara committed suicide. On April 23, 1909, Clara Haber wrote to her PhD advisor and confidant, Richard Abegg, the following lines. What Fritz Haber has gained during these last 8 years, I have lost, and what's left of me fills me with the deepest dissatisfaction. After her successful Abitur exam, Clara applied to the university curator's office for permission to attend lectures in experimental physics as a guest, and she had to proceed in a similarly awkward manner with all the other lecture courses that she wished to take. From early on, Clara developed a keen interest in the then new field of physical chemistry. Richard Abegg, one of this new field's pioneers and a friend of Fritz Haber's, played a key role in fostering Clara's interest in physical chemistry, while paying little heed to Clara's guest auditor status. It was also Abegg who supervised Clara's PhD thesis, a part of the graduation requirement in chemistry, and who wrote a joint paper with Clara in 1899. The joint paper, published in 1900, must have been perceived by the young female chemist as proof of her success and as an accolade. The following year, Clara submitted her dissertation and applied to be admitted to the rigorosum final, which entailed exams in chemistry, physics, mineralogy, and philosophy. She passed the exams during the fall and defended her thesis at the university's main auditorium on December 22, 1900. Clara graduated with magna cum laude, and her graduation was mentioned in the daily press, as Clara was the first woman on whom the University of Breslau conferred a doctoral degree. The left panel of Figure 1 shows her photo during her university studies. Richard Abegg assumed in 1899 an academic position at the Chemistry Institute of the University of Breslau, which belonged to the most prestigious in Germany. In 1909, Abegg became ordinarius at the newly founded Technical University in Breslau. However, he would not live long enough to see through the construction of the new laboratory for physical chemistry at the Technical University, which was slated to be his own. Abegg was an early fan of balloon flying and founded and presided over the Breslau Ballooning Club. He died in a ballooning accident in 1910 at the age of 41. Otto Sacher was Clara's colleague, 10 years her junior, who studied chemistry at the University of Breslau, where, like Clara, he found an enlightened mentor in Richard Abegg. Sacher served on Clara's PhD committee as a referee. As a graduate researcher at the University of Breslau, he was left after Abegg's death without an academic patron or a laboratory. It was during this period that Sacher launched his research at the intersection of thermodynamics and quantum theory. A reward in the form of a more senior appointment came at the end of 1913 when, thanks in part to mediation by Clara Haber, Sacher received a call to Haber's Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin. In 1914, he was promoted to the rank of a department head. After the outbreak of World War I, he was enlisted in military research at Haber's Institute, but continued on the side his experiments on the behavior of gases at low temperatures. In December of 1914, he was killed in a laboratory accident at his workbench while trying to tame cacodyl chloride for use as an irritant and propellant. He was just 34 years old, while Abegg represented Clara's connection to science who, in addition, acted as her cheerleader and confidant in private matters. Otto Sacher was Clara's friend and commilitone. After Sacher's laboratory accident, Clara was among the first to attend to the injured. She proved capable of acting rationally in a situation drastic to the extreme and to coordinate attempts to help the injured. However, Sacher died on the spot, before her eyes. Clara was crushed by his death. At the site of the accident, Fritz Haber was just gasping for air in the arms of a co-worker. He was shattered to the point that he stopped explosives research at his institute. The strains and conflicts between Clara and Fritz further aggravated after the outbreak of World War I. In keeping with the maxim, "in peace for mankind, in War for the Fatherland. Fritz Haber applied himself in extraordinary ways to aid the German war effort, in part encouraged by the French use of tear gas, Haber 1924, including its lethal variants. Haber took the initiative to employ chemistry in resolving the greatest strategic challenge of the war, namely the stalemate of trench warfare. Brought to glistening prominence by Germany's need to produce gunpowder from air, Haber, backed by the profiteering chemical industry, was able to persuade his country's military leadership to stage a battlefield test of a chemical weapon, of poison instead of air. This would earn him the epithet, Father of Chemical Warfare. The lethality of the April 22, 1915 chlorine cloud attack at Ypres lured the German military into adopting chemical warfare. Haber was promoted, by an imperial decree, to the rank of captain. Haber celebrated the success at Ypres and his promotion at a gathering in his directorial mansion in Dahlem. The gathering took place in the evening of May 1, 1915. Afterwards, during the night from May 1 to May 2, Clara Haber committed suicide. She shot herself with Haber's army pistol in the garden of their mansion. Apparently, Haber, sedated by his daily allowance of sleeping pills, didn't hear the shots. There were two. Clara was found dying by their 13-year-old son Hermann. Later, Hermann Haber also died by suicide in 1946 after emigrating to the United States. He had a daughter, Claire, who was working for the U.S. government to discover an antidote to the lethal effects of chlorine gas. She also committed suicide. While we're on the subject of suicide, Haber shares the royalties from the process of ammonia production with his private assistant, Robert Le Rossignol, a young British chemist from the Channel Islands. His son, Peter Walter, took his own life in Cambridge while studying natural sciences at Sydney, Sussex, after, as he thought, failing his chemistry examination. And in September 1943, his other son, John Augustine, then an elite RAF pilot, was killed in the Italian campaign. Because of the Great War, production of synthetic ammonia in Germany ran into hundreds of thousands of metric tons per year. Through his royalties, Haber became fabulously wealthy, especially between 1914 and 1917. His finances for 1918 were affected by the Allied invasion of Germany and by being named as a war criminal. Thereafter, German hyperinflation from 1921 to 1924 reduced his income to almost nothing. Throughout this period, however, Haber played fair with Le Rossignol, who received a share of Haber's payments. 139. The first substantial payment to him was made in 1914 and the last in 1924, the latter about 2 million marks, nominally £20,000, but worthless because of hyperinflation. 140, but for 1915 to 17 alone. This author calculates Le Rossignol's entitlement as somewhere between £22,000 and £30,000, 141, a figure in order of magnitude agreement with his 1924 payment, although it is uncertain how many years the latter payment covered. These financial dealings were private, and we cannot be sure how much Le Rossignol received overall, because Haber's financial arrangements have remained utterly impenetrable. Even so, over the duration of their contract, his entitlement ran into many tens of thousands of pounds. Because of circumstance, however, what he actually received was only about 10% of what was due. Even so, the amounts concerned were astronomical for the time, and Le Rossignol later told Chirnside that what he had received was enough for one man. 142. Le Rossignol returned to Germany frequently during the 1920s, often meeting with Haber and taking care of the investments which remained there. The two men remained friends until Haber died in 1934. Haber resigned from the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute when ordered by the Nazis to remove his Jewish scientists. In 1933, when leaving for a position at Cambridge, he sought an honorable separation from Germany to avoid the charges of unpatriotic desertion, which would not only have decimated his finances, but branded him a tax evader. Such was his emotional attachment to Germany. It was a legacy he could not countenance, and this illustrates the tension he felt at being torn between his obligations on the one hand and his pursuit of money as reward on the other. Haber's patriotism was unquestionable. He later said of World War I, Science is for the world, but for your country in time of war. But we should not suppose that he enjoyed war per se. He hated the suffering, the waste of life, the pointlessness of it all, for in his emotional ground state, he was kindly, helpful, and benevolent. But it is equally true that the excitation of war transformed him into a ruthless autocrat, a side of him which in peacetime he either suppressed or made manifest as his strength of purpose. He gave his whole being over to the struggle for victory, and nothing was allowed to deflect him. Neither family, nor human suffering, nor considerations of international law. He brought a vitality to all the positions he held, and he always placed Germany first. For 3 or 4 generations past, his family had fought for or served Germany, and he was proud to have become a Prussian officer and such an influential military man. So when defeat finally came, it weighed heavily upon him, as did the personal repercussions of his role in chemical warfare. In the wider terms of his science, Haber was characterized by versatility. There was hardly an important branch of contemporary physical chemistry to which he did not make a fundamental contribution. But, despite all his talents, his eclectic and fundamental contributions to chemistry, his energy and his devotion to duty, he is remembered by many today not by the epitaph he composed for himself. He served his country in war and peace as long as it was granted him, but in a way he would have never have wanted. As a Jew, the father of chemical warfare,